Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. And I hope wherever you are, you're keeping safe and your family's safe and you're taking good care of yourself. Let me start with macro thoughts. From 0 to 200,000 cases took 4 months. From 200,000 to 400,000 cases took a week. This is from Norbert Elekes, and currently when I looked at Johns Hopkins, it was 423,121 last. The Economist nails it again with its cover. This is from Thomas Juneau, and speaks to what I would describe as a rolling sudden stop, which is what we've currently been witnessing. For the first time yesterday, we added more than 40,000 confirmed cases globally in a single day, 10,168 of which came from the US alone. Seems these pandemics come through every 100 years, says Gachife. Indeed, they do. And interestingly, I've been looking at the Spanish flu as well, and that had 3 waves, of which the second wave was much more virulent than the first. Coronavirus has started behaving a lot like a once-in-a-century pathogen we've been worried about, says Bill Gates. Malcolm Gladwell described that moment in an epidemic when a virus reaches critical mass. It's the boiling point, it's the moment on the graph when the line starts to shoot straight upwards, he said. And I think that moment clearly has definitively arrived. What's certain is that the whole global economy has been hit by an insidious, literally invisible circuit breaker. And I also wrote that a non-linear and exponential virus represents the greatest risk to a control machine in point of fact. Policymakers somehow still believe in their linear minds that more free money, more rate cuts will resuscitate the patient, which is like a patient etherized on a table. And I saw an announcement just before I went to do this podcast that they've agreed on a $2 trillion support package. But that's not going to be enough because the global economy is coming to a sudden stop. Of that, we are sure. We are moving from a world of hyper-connectedness to a world of quarantine. A complete quarantine is the only way to vaccine this 21st century world of ours. World economists and policymakers remain flummoxed by the exponential and multiplicative nature of the COVID-19. And the virus is not correlated to endogenous market dynamics, but is an exogenous uncertainty that remains unresolved, and therefore it is a black swan. The highest basis, I'm very bullish on gold, and it's been very peculiar to watch in the last 24 hours, and I'll try and analyze it for you. Highest basis since September 2008, and this is what happened back then. That's from IV_technicals. Massive spreading in the gold market this morning. I just talked to Ole Hansen, and he said it is caused by a massive disruption in the supply chain. Companies literally can't get their gold to where it needs to go, and that is causing the physical market to dry up. And this is a key point. There seems to be a physical shortage. Gold also underperformed in 2008 until the Fed stepped in and removed liquidity constraints. Goldman says, I believe, as I said on the 22nd of March, that gold will soon turn viral to the upside, and I'm looking for $2,000, if not more. COMEX gold premium to OTC gold has climbed sharply, as this chart from Bloomberg shows. This is from JReid_WGC. The EFP stood at about $6 on the 23rd of March. A day later, it's $20, and it's even more now, which is due to shortages of investment gold and difficulties in shipping the metal around. And now this brings me to this 2 trillion Scott Burke 777, called it the print shop, and indeed, that's precisely what we're looking at now. The viral moment has arrived, and I said that on the 24th of February before an almighty sell-off, I have to admit. And I said then, at this point, I would venture gold is correlated to the coronavirus, which is set to turn parabolic and is already non-linear and exponential. Corona has hit the bullion market, the gold OTC spot market is well and truly broken right now. The spread to GCMO continues to blow out now around $75. So it definitely, in my view, has escape velocity. They'll obviously try and hold it back a little bit as long as they can, but I don't think they'll succeed. With the stock market, I said previously on the 24th of February, a rate cut or even fall will produce a dead cat bounce and then a dynamic move to the downside. Policymakers cannot vaccine the market with rate cuts. However, yesterday the Dow Jones surged more than 2,000 points in its biggest rally since 1933. Let's see how long that lasts, I asked, but today we've got $2 trillion coming to support it for a second day. Let's see if that can hold. Let's turn to home thoughts. God destroyed the world in a flood. Please sit your ass down, says A. Olomi. I thought that was quite funny. This is Sandhoff lilies bloom for the first time in 3 years. Good rains in Namibia have led to a spectacular bloom of lilies on the Sandhoff farm, about 40 kilometers outside the town of Maltehoe in southern Namibia. These were flowers that I saw on the way to Saruni camp in Samburu. Bill Gates says we can't restart the economy soon and simply ignore that pile of bodies over in the corner. There really is no middle ground, and it's very tough to say to people, hey, keep going to restaurants, go buy new houses, ignore that pile of bodies over in the corner. We want you to keep spending because there's maybe a politician who thinks GDP growth is all that counts, Gates said in an interview with TED on Tuesday. It's very irresponsible for somebody to suggest that we can have the best of both worlds, and that's obviously a riposte to President Trump as well. Coronavirus, he also said, has started behaving a lot like the once-in-a-century pathogen we've been worried about. I, for some reason, went back to Lana Del Rey's song Born to Die, which seems to be the argument of some people. I was rather fond of it, actually. Del Rey's California, which is the California of our collective unconsciousness, a dream song. Last Stop Now or Never, in his essay 15 Takes on California, the critic David L. Ulin writes of our sense of this place as a final landscape, last territory on the continent where we face ourselves because there is nowhere to turn. Del Rey can be a deft lyricist, grasping, bruising little lines like I lost myself when I lost you. Ain't it strange that you're not here with me? My daughters are a little bit embarrassed that I like Lana Del Rey. They think it's inappropriate. I, however, still like her a lot. The saliva of COVID-19 patients can harbor 500 billion virus particles per teaspoon, and a cough aerosolizes it into a diffuse mist. COVID-19 killed more people in the last 12 hours, 850, than SARS killed in the years since it emerged in 2002, which is something to think about. That's from Zorin RQ. In the last 24 hours, a record high of over 39,000 cases of COVID-19 were detected and 1,700 died from the coronavirus. And that speaks to Gladwell's comment, it's the moment on the graph when the line shoots straight upwards. As to growth, the exponential trend is still very clear. COVID-19 cases multiply by 10 every 14 days. Deaths multiply by 10 every 12 days. Meanwhile, in Russia, Putin visits the coronavirus patients on the front line. He is a geopolitical grandmaster, and as I said in 2016, it's been a parabolic rebound, hasn't it? Now, returning to Trump, this is what Jenna Friedman said: a reality TV star botched the response to a global pandemic, and now we are all imprisoned in our homes and forced to watch him daily. Indeed. Compare that to Governor Cuomo and his little video he made. We're going to fight every way we can to save every life that we can. And really, that's what President Trump should be saying. That's what it means to be an American, and that's what it means to be a New Yorker, he said. Please do not take medical advice from a man who looked directly at a solar eclipse, said Hillary Clinton. Trump suggests going back to work during a pandemic is really no big deal because lots of people die from the flu and car accidents. He said we're near the end of our historic battle as the country barely enters the pandemic. And as I said, to watch the daily briefing is to understand that the control machine has a hubristic man in charge of the console. Trump warns of massive depression, mass suicides, tremendous death if Americans continue to social distance and restaurants stay closed. Philip Rucker. I never, and I mean ever, want to hear someone claim to be pro-life when they're okay with letting a deadly plague run rampant through society for the sake of their stock portfolio. That's another valid point, isn't it? Medieval nobles cared more about their peasants during the Black Death. My last article was COVID-19 and a rolling sudden stop. I said in that we're looking in the rearview mirror in terms of the data points that we're seeing. And that was confirmed by Francesco Aleva, spokesman for Bergamo's mayor. We believe the true numbers of COVID-19 are hidden, he said. Many people are dying at home or in structures for the elderly, and they have never been tested for the virus. In the epidemic's fourth week, Lorini estimates that the true number of infected in the area is 5 to 10 times the official figure of 4,645. The current regimen allows testing only of people who show up at a screening area at the hospital with severe symptoms, missing people who are sick at home. My previous article, 2nd March, COVID and Sub-Saharan Africa, and the R word, 1st of March, the origin of the coronavirus, 24th of February, the viral moment has arrived. The kind of people who want to assemble in large groups right now are exactly the kind of people who ought to, the tweet of God. Viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics. That was from the 16th of February. 3rd of February, I was speaking about the coronavirus, the non-linearity and exponential risks that we were facing. And October 2014, I was speaking about Ebola, and I said it's all about escape velocity. Viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics. International markets, a V-shaped recovery, I said previously, is a fantasy. Indeed it is. And now global COVID recession, this is from Robin Brooks at IIF. Unlike 2019, this is about complete collapse in services. US lags Europe, which in turn lags China. Worse is to come. Big GDP contractions in Q2 are now a matter of record. Open question is if we can bounce back in quarter 3 and quarter 4, and I think that's going to be quite difficult to achieve. COVID-19 caused the largest collapse in business activity ever recorded in the Eurozone, according to our data. The composite output PMI fell to 31.4, falling over 20 points, and signaling a quarterly contraction of approximately -2%. As I said previously, the New York Stock Exchange is perfectly correlated to President Trump's competence and incompetence. We've had a rebound. It's a dead cat bounce from my perspective, but it's probably got a little bit more energy because of this big package that's being thrown at it. Normal flu average, 1.4 persons infected. After 10 layers of infection, the initial person has passed on the flu to 14 folk. With COVID-19, it's an average of 3 persons infected. After 10 layers, 59,000 are infected. That's the non-linearity and why people who keep saying the flu don't get it. Currency markets, euro dollar 108.20, dollar index 101.51, Japanese yen 111.33. The dollar's sold off a little bit ahead of this package. Swiss franc 0.9806, the pound 118.31, the Aussies regained 60.6035, India rupee 76.25, South Korean won 12.2906, Brazilian real 5.099, Egyptian pound 15.7455, and the South African rand 17.4611. Dollar index is at 101.51, euro dollar is at 108.20. Commodity markets, crude oil is at $25.35. Sub-Saharan Africa, coronavirus, we've gone from looming threat to looming disaster. This is an interview with the Africa CDC director. He's leading the continental response to the COVID-19 pandemic. He speaks of the exponential spread of the disease, the number of deaths, and how much money these countries that are extremely developed are injecting in their economies. We don't have, not remotely, those kinds of resources. I'm extremely concerned with what could happen in Africa, he says. Part of the African Union. We don't have remotely those kind of resources. We have to see this pandemic as an economic disaster, a security disaster, and a humanitarian disaster, and they're all interrelated, he says. I calculate Sub-Saharan Africa will contract in 2020. It would not be an exaggeration to say we're staring into the abyss of a zombie apocalypse. I wrote about debt, virus, and locusts creating a perfect storm for Africa. And we are looking in the rear view mirror. How much do you need to haircut fully sub-Saharan African remittances? 10%, 20%, 25%? And on the 2nd of March, I was saying, the first issue is whether the virus will infect the continent. That issue is now established. We know that coronavirus is exponential, non-linear, multiplicative, and we know what exponential disease propagation looks like in the real world. Real world exponential growth looks like nothing, 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 then cluster, 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 then boom. I have to assume that the coronavirus is already in Africa, but just not diagnosed. That's a racing certainty. Previously, I said Bole, Ethiopia, is the epicenter of China, Africa, and China and the world connectedness because of Fly Ethiopian. This disease, when it comes to Africa, will be more dramatic than in China, and I don't want to play down what is happening in China, Bill Gates. This is how patients going to Wilkins Hospital are being picked. Ambulances don't even have stretchers. There is no water at Wilkins, folks using buckets. And bear in mind, they've reported 3 cases and they've reported 2 deaths already. And that is quite a worry, because if you have 2 deaths, you can model it back and say you've got hundreds of cases. We are indeed past the point of no return. International seeding events started to occur in mid-January, thus we have a critical 10 weeks from then to late March. We're now there to contain these nascent outbreaks before they become sizable. Here you see priests on the street with their thuribles, burning incense in prayer processions. There seems to be, particularly amongst the more religious people, a kind of faith in God that he will protect them. Extreme concerns about coronavirus making landfall in Africa was an interview I did on Radio 702 with Bruce Whitfield. South Africa's confirmed COVID-19 cases have risen to 709. From 554, and we're now going to see an acceleration, in my view. South African All Shares down 27.91%, dollar rand at 17.39, Egyptian pound at 15.74, EGX30 down 30.02% so far this year. Nigerian Naira remains under strain after devaluation. The Monetary Policy Committee of Africa's oil producers meeting and they decided to leave rates unchanged. Other major oil currencies have fallen much more this month following the plunge in Brent crude prices to less than $30 a barrel. Russia's ruble is down by 15%, Colombia's peso by 14%. The derivative and black market suggests the Naira is still under plenty of strain. Price of 3-month non-deliverable forward contracts has surged to 421, signaling traders see another 10% devaluation. 1-year NDFs rose above 500 for the first time on Monday. Oil accounts for about half of the government revenue and 90% of exports. Foreign exchange reserves have decreased 20% since July to $35.9 billion. Nigeria started offering crude at an unusually low discount from next month in an effort to undercut its rivals. Further devaluation is likely, considering oil exporter peer devaluation and an overvalued starting point. Standard Group saying Monday they expected the Naira to trade between 385 and 390. Look, as I wrote in that Africa Report article, their revenue is cratering. There is $16 billion of hot money parked in short-term certificates, which is all headed for the exit as we speak. External debt currency risks facing African countries also covered this issue in a podcast with Nicholas Norbrook. Nigerian All Shares down 19%, Ghana Stock Exchange is down 3.49%. Kenya is seeking more than $1 billion from the IMF and World Bank, in talks with the World Bank and the IMF. World Bank for budget support of $750 million, IMF for $350 million in emergency assistance. also expects $50 million from the World Bank to support its efforts against the brunt of the coronavirus pandemic. We expect new flows related to the crisis. Kenya has 16 confirmed cases of the coronavirus. I've expressed my concerns to what the situation portends. Kenya shilling is at 106.40, record low was 106.90. Nairobi All Share is down 25.16%. NSE20 is down 28.9%. Thank you for listening.